Hello everyone, I'm back playing Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, and after doing everything in the DLC, Vigilant trophies, challenges, everything, the servers didn't save my progress. So yeah, I'm angry and sad, but I'm gonna do the review anyway, because why not? The game didn't even save me beating the Joker DLC, so why do I expect anything different from this trash fire of a game? So let's talk about the Mrs. Freeze DLC. So like with the Joker DLC, which themed everything after Joker, the Frozen Hearts expansion starts with a cheap cutscene, and the world and incursions now have a Frozen theme to them. Players are tasked with recruiting Mrs. Freeze from another dimension conquered by Brainiac. Mrs. Freeze agrees to join in exchange for a haven for her wife Nora, who is in a coma due to a life-threatening disease. You must also save the Flash from this world and bring him back to your own world. I'm gonna be straight up, the story just sucks. Unlike Victor Freeze, Mrs. Freeze lacks an interesting personality. Whereas Victor was consumed with his desire to cure Nora to the point one can argue it went against Nora's will, something that was poetically addressed in the Batman Arkham Knight DLC in From the Cold, where Nora convinced Victor to stop the calamity and just spend what little time she had left with him. Here, Nora and Mrs. Freeze are both criminals. Nora is an eco-terrorist, and Mrs. Freeze robbed banks in an attempt for them to live together outside the grid before Brainiac attacked. It's really strange how everyone reacts to Nora with such glee when you bring her to their world, like she's the greatest person in the world despite knowing nothing about her. It's just really strange the way they talk in such high value about her, despite, again, not knowing anything about this woman other than she was an eco-terrorist. Most importantly, Mrs. Freeze lacks the violent, single-minded aggression that made Victor an unstable yet interesting character. Mrs. Freeze's devotion to Nora is noted, but never crosses the line into obsession like with Victor, which just makes her really boring. Instead, Mrs. Freeze acts like an influencer, making snarky comments and edgy one-liners during combat. She's just bland. It's even more surprising that Amanda never threatens Nora if Mrs. Freeze doesn't cooperate or doesn't stand in line, something that Amanda Waller would 100% do even if there was a slight bit of insubordination. A more interesting take would have been if they swapped Nora and Victor, making it that Victor was the one in the coma and Nora was using Victor's tech to try and cure him and keep him safe, going down the same path as Victor but without Victor's training or expertise, resulting in her changing into something that she's not, even going down the road where she becomes even more violent and unstable. I just don't really understand the need to gender swap Mr. Freeze but just keep Nora the same way, with the exception of the eco-terrorism. It's just a really strange decision. The gameplay is much of the same, but now you can store gear, which I guess is cool, but most of the time I would just dismantle any unnecessary gear. The developers did increase the difficulty artificially by increasing more enemies with Green Lantern shields, requiring you to destroy the Green Lantern weapons to break them, but the Green Lantern weapons spawn after the shield, which break up the action and makes it much slower, which I just don't get why they did. There are a lot more snipers this time around, enemy bombardments, and now including airstrikes. I did say artificial because it doesn't really make the game harder, it's just much more annoying. Like in the core game, all these enemies and the airstrikes included have impeccable aim. Sometimes even the enemies can shoot through the terrain, such as with the tanks, which just makes it even more annoying. So I don't really know what they were going with this entire system. I guess they found out that the first DLC was too easy, so they decided to ramp it up by just doing the most amateur thing possible by just increasing the enemy count. And again, with the Green Lantern shield, and it just makes things absolutely obtuse. I spent more time getting knocked down in this DLC than anything else. As for Mrs. Freeze, she's kind of fun to play with. The Frozen Axe is alright, but no different from any other melee weapon I used. Her second ability creates an area of frost damage, and her traversal ability is similar to Deadshot, but this time it has 2 recharges instead of 1. I mean, it's cool to look at, but it's basically Deadshot's skill. But you'll need to re-level her because, God forbid, they give you a fully leveled Mrs. Freeze character. And yes, they did repeat the same issue as with the Joker DLC, where you have to grind to level 25 to unlock Mrs. Freeze and then level 30 to face Brainiac, or you can pay $10 to gain instant access to her, but you still need to grind to level 30 to face Brainiac. So if you bought this, you're a complete idiot because you still have to grind to level 30 in order to face the very final boss that you bought Mrs. Freeze for. But even more insulting is that the publishers are trying to sell you the old Batman Arkham skins for Harley, Joker, and Mrs. Freeze for $10 a piece. Just wow. I mean, in the beginning of the freaking campaign, Harley literally says not in a million years when she sees the outfit, and now you can buy the outfit and put it into the character model. It's just like, so you're backpedaling on everything you did for this deal, for this game? Not to mention, like, Victor Freeze's costume on Mrs. Freeze. Like, why? Like, I'm just, like, at a loss of words of how just utterly stupid this is. They are really desperate for money. As for the fight with Brainiac, he just swaps between the Flash and Superman. That's it. You just fight both of the boss fights combined into one. And on top of it, there's also the airstrikes and all the other stuff that gets you knocked down. The DLC ends with the Flash just literally appearing like freaking Kramer from Seinfeld walking into Jerry's apartment, and then Task Force X bringing them back into their home base and putting them into stasis. You would think this would be a monumental moment, you know, you just rescued the Flash, but instead they treated it with little care. Just some photos of them posing with the Flash trying to be funny. Like, you would expect Captain Boomerang would at least try to kill him. As for the Battle Pass, you get some discount Buzz Lightyear costumes and very generic stuff. It's basically garbage. Somehow Mrs. Freeze's DLC is worse than the Joker, because it's not just boring, it's lazy. Nothing about it adds anything other than a new character that doesn't really have anything noteworthy to them. At least with the Joker, he kept some of his unstable nature. I mean, he was still a poor caricature of the real Joker, but Mrs. Freeze has nothing of real value to her, and was written by people who don't understand the Mr. Freeze character at all. It's almost they just tried to do something that was as non-confrontational as possible while masquerading as Mr. Freeze. And the gameplay has nothing really going for it. It's the same thing we've always experienced. They kind of just tried to put into our faces flashy new changes, but I can't really see anything different between this DLC and what's been happening throughout the entire Suicide Squad campaign. I don't really know how they plan to make back the money that they put into this entire project, and I guess they're really desperate, considering not only are they trying to sell the DLC for $10 to push you up so you will get this character, but they're also selling the old Arkham skins in order to hope that people who have nostalgia and rose-colored glasses will buy these skins. Overall, I can't recommend this to anyone. I played it and I felt like I was robbed. Not to mention, they technically did rob me because they didn't even save my progression. So, at the core of this all, I would say avoid this at all costs. If you can, probably sell your copy of the game and just hope you can get a few pennies for it. I mean, at this point, I feel like it's dead on arrival at this point, and I have no idea how they plan to continue forward with content like this.